Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to the show. It's your host, Danny Haifong. I am joined once again by Professor Mohammad Marandi from Iran. Professor Marandi, thanks so much again for joining me today.
Thank you, Danny. It's always a pleasure being on your show.
Yes, hit the like button, everyone. We're going to get into the latest updates now that helps boost the show as we do it. So, Professor Marandi, we have to talk about this rescue operation. The United States is claiming major success in this operation. I can just pull up right now. I won't read the whole thing, but here is what Donald Trump announced in his True Social, talking about how we got him, and then that was a daring search and rescue operation. He's safe and sound now. This is the downed pilot of the F-15, down by Iran 2 days ago. The brave warrior was behind enemy lines, treacherous mountains of Iran, and he had the president, the war secretary, everyone by his side, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, 24 hours a day, and they got him out. He did admit that he sustained injuries, but will be just fine. But Professor Marandi, Iran is saying something quite different here, and I want to be sure that people get this perspective because they may not get it anywhere else. Iran is calling this operation an absolute failure. Here is what um, Iranian media. Let me just find it here. Well, first, let's look at the aftermath of what they claim the military have done. This is what Iran released. These are the wreckages of all of the aircraft
Looks
that
yeah,
were
looks pretty victorious to
yeah
me.
that were involved in this. Two
Can you
MC-1.
hear them bombing? Can you hear the bombing?
I cannot,
Uh,
but I totally believe you. I don't know if the audience can. Everyone, please let them know, and I'll see. But yeah, I mean, this is the barbarism that's going on right now in Iran, everyone, and this is what U.S. Special Ops, the Air Force Special Ops that were trying to rescue the downed pilot. This is what happened. Two MC-130 aircraft were destroyed. Four helicopters were destroyed in this operation. Iran is even saying that this wasn't even an operation to rescue the pilot, that there was actually maybe more to this. But nonetheless, these MC-130s cost $100 million, Professor Marandi, not to mention the fact that the justification for why these aircraft are destroyed by the United States is that they were stuck in the sand while they were trying to leave, and that forced them to destroy their own aircraft. Iran is saying that they destroyed their own aircraft. They didn't destroy the aircraft, it was Iran who did it, and that the United States was actually trying to kill the pilot and kill those who were a part of the rescue operation, knowing it would fail. So, first of all, what do you make of this? Obviously, there's a lot of fog of war here, and that the U.S. really needed a win. But I'm curious your reactions and your thoughts, especially given the context of where this war is right now.
I didn't hear the Iranians say that they wanted to kill the pilot.
Oh, no, 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 no. That the United States was trying to kill their
No, I
own
mean,
pilot. Oh,
yeah, I haven't heard that. I haven't heard that myself. But what the Iranians are saying is that these two planes were not stuck in the sand, and that the Americans and that the planes were damaged, they were fired upon, and that on the ground, and that this is what I've heard, and that the Americans had to leave, and they also believe that this was um, not simply about some rescue operation for a pilot, but that these planes and uh, the soldiers were there for something bigger. But it went wrong, and they didn't have the time to carry out whatever it was they wanted to do, and they had to swiftly retreat. I personally don't think that this was a success by what it was they wanted to do, and they had to swiftly retreat. I personally don't think that this was a success by any means, destroying two planes and four helicopters, having the during the previous day two other planes and two other helicopters uh, destroyed. That's not a good sign. Some people will say, well, why didn't, and these were just locals, villagers, people living in that area. They took their arms and sought out these invaders. But some people would say, well, why didn't Iran have their armed forces there? Iran is a huge country. It's the size of the UK, Germany, France combined, and even bigger. And so, in some areas, there it's very the population is quite low. So the air defenses and the military presence tends to be where we have large populations, and the terrain there, I think, is evident of the fact that there isn't much going on. But in any case, this is definitely not a success. Having to destroy and bomb two damaged planes, or even if they say they weren't damaged, but two damaged planes and four helicopters alongside them. Apparently, there were four helicopters. That's not a success. Assuming that this is just about retrieving a single injured pilot. And I saw something, I think it was on Sky News, where I saw a clip where they were talking about this pilot, and you saw there was wall to wall coverage when they slaughtered 100 and what was it, 68 little girls at an elementary school. We didn't
Right.
see any wall to wall coverage. Actually, we didn't see any coverage. But and then one of these people who was on the show on Sky News was saying, they're seeking him out and they're trying to find him, and this puts a human face on this whole war.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, like the guy who bombs kids, that's that's the human face of it all, and all those kids slaughtered, and all those women slaughtered, and all those workers in factories who were burned alive by the Americans and Israelis. And the fact that Trump wants to send Iran back to the Stone Age,
Yeah.
you don't see any Western media outlet say these, threatening to send Iran back to the Stone Age these are threats of crimes against humanity. You don't see any outrage in the Guardian or among these European leftists who pretend to be, anti-imperialists. You don't see anything from anyone. And it just shows the utter moral bankruptcy of the entire political class in the West. And I'm not just talking about Democrats and Republicans, I'm talking about those sort of mainstream critics um, of US foreign policy. The language that Trump is using to dehuman, and of course, all of them are complicit. I mean, all these people who've been saying the Iranian regime is this and lying. Even people like anyway, even like the so-called leftists and others who've been who are sort of on the uh, margins of the mainstream political sphere. Who, on the one hand, they say don't attack, don't bomb. Yes, they're bad, they're evil, they murder, they slaughter tens of thousands of peaceful protesters, and all that nonsense. And of course, just today, Trump admitted that he was sending weapons to the protesters, according to Sky News, according to Fox News journalists who spoke to him today. But of course, that's all ancient history. They'll just repeat the same nonsense over and over again. But it is quite stunning that um, we are living in a day and age where the leader of the United States can threaten to send people back to the Stone Age repeatedly, and no one is saying this is a monster. These are monsters who are in charge, and that basically means that they're all monsters. That means everyone at the New York Times, in the Guardian, all these in the Washington Post and Fox News, MSNBC, BBC. They're all monsters. There's no difference between any of them because many of them have Twitter accounts. I don't see any of them screaming and pulling their hair out for these threats being made against the Iranian people. But in any case, this is no victory, and they can pretend that it's a victory. It's all been a victory. This war was supposed to be over in 2 days, and then our missiles were supposed to finish in 1 week. And here we are into the 6th week, and the Iranians are hitting hard. It targets in this sinister apartheid regime, this genocidal regime, and across the Persian Gulf at U.S. affiliated assets. So, and the Strait of Hormuz is controlled by Iran. So, if this is all a big victory for Trump, well, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, people may forget, especially in the West, that this F-15 was shot down trying to enter Iranian airspace in the south. And what was it trying to do? Well, it was obviously going to conduct strikes against Iran, likely, if not entirely, on civilians and civilian infrastructure. So that's really the base of where we should be starting. Of course, the Western mainstream media doesn't do that. But here's the Fars News report. I couldn't find the link, but this is from
And
someone.
just one thing before
Mhm.
you continue,
Yeah,
Danny.
sure.
Almost exclusively, the targets are now civilian because they have failed to take out Iran's defense capabilities. They're all deep underground. Iran's air force in underground tunnels. Iran's air defenses. I've shown a clip. I've tweeted a clip of Iran's air defenses underground. Iran's air defenses deep underground. They take them out when they need them. The air force, they bring them out when they need them. Iran's navy, as I think I said before on your show, all deep underground alongside the coast of the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. Speedboats with missiles, all prepared. They destroyed nothing of significance in the Navy. They bombed a few ships that were in port that are not used
They
for
were
fighting
important. Yep.
wars. Yeah, and so the Air Force, the air defense, and of course the drone and missile underground cities, their factories, they're all intact, and that's why Iran is firing missiles and drones on a daily basis. That's why they are still shooting down planes, and they get frustrated and they start bombing more and more civilian targets. They
Mhm.
bomb uh, apartment blocks. They bomb hospitals. Uh, what they've been doing in the last few days is looking for new uh, types of civilian infrastructure to target. So now they're start targeting universities. They're bombing universities. They bombed the Shahid Beheshti University a couple of days ago. Before that, in Tehran, they bombed the sorry, another technical university. They're bombing universities. They're bombing, all sorts of civilian infrastructure, and of course, simultaneously in Lebanon, they're bombing. And today they bombed an ambulance in Iran, as they've been doing that regularly. When they see an ambulance, they bomb it. They bomb truck drivers. I have a I may have told you this last time. I'm not sure if this is a repetition. Sorry. A friend of mine, his brother-in-law has a business, and he hired two truck drivers to take goods from their city to another city, and they bombed them and killed both drivers and destroyed the two trucks that belonged to the drivers. So, this is the sort of these are they bombed a big bridge that was completed. People were
Like the Karj Bridge, right?
uh,
Is that what it's called? Yeah,
yes, it's
sure.
yes in Karaj, and it was newly built. It was, I think, about to be inaugurated, and people were picnicking under the bridge, and then lots of people were badly wounded and many killed, families, children, when all the rubble and sh- uh, shrapnel fell down upon them. But in the West, it's okay. I mean, the New York Times doesn't care. The Guardian doesn't care. They just 4 or 5 nights ago. I said this on another show. 4 or 5 nights ago, very close to where I am right now. A 15-minute walk, 20-minute walk at most, 20 minutes, in a place near called Artish Square. They bombed a gathering of people. I told you about these gatherings. Every night there are gatherings of people across Tehran and across the country in defiance of the Trump regime and the Epstein coalition. And they fired missiles at them just 15 minutes away from here. And a woman was killed. They killed the protester, someone who was defending the Constitution and the armed forces. And they did that, I think I told you, on the last Friday of Ramadan also, where I was there, and there's footage of it. I think you probably recall. where people were on the streets and they bombed it. They fired missiles at the demonstration. There's actually a very interesting footage of a young woman, a PhD student of the from the University of Tehran, in fact, where she was talking about why is it that people don't run away and why is it they chant Allahu Akbar. And while she did it, while she was speaking, the missile blew up behind her. I don't know if you saw that clip.
Mm-hmm.
You would think that in Western media that clip would go viral and that she would be invited on all the news channels, the BBC, Sky News, ABC, NBC, CBS. I mean, she'd be all over the place telling her story. A woman, but they won't do that. That's, that goes against the rules.
Mm-hmm.
So all these young women who are on the streets at nights under fire, they don't stampede, they don't run away, or during the days when they gather. These teenagers who can just go home and do what teenagers do. They stand their ground on the streets. And they want to emancipate these women, these young women. These young women have to go and emancipate these, regime affiliated activists in the United States and across Europe, and these fake leftists and former presidential candidates and former Grecian government ministers. I don't know if you hear that. It's carpet bombing. Bomb after bomb after bomb. That's carpet bombing. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Professor Marandi, I mean, those are all great points. Though this is, I think, why we will never see a U.S. victory in this war, because it's people, the ordinary Iranians, alongside their military. I cannot. Maybe the audience can. I cannot though. But we've heard it before on this program. It's for sure an absolute crime. What's going on right now?
Just 1 second.
Yes.
There's a demonstration right here, but people are gathered.
I heard a blast. I heard a blast right immediately when you said.
Yeah, there are lots of blasts. Yeah, very close by, and there are people on the streets very close by. So this is they're still bombing. Anyway, let's go.
Absolute criminal, and well, just to wrap up this point on what happened in this ridiculous operation for Marandi that goes in line with everything that you said. This is according to Fars News, citing local sources. Of course, we already went over the destruction of the aircraft, the transport planes, the helicopters. They also say Reaper drones, Hermes drones. But this is the thing. Field sources do report killing of several American forces. I think Iran has said that about 9 people were killed on their side. But unclear how many Americans died in this so-called operation, which we don't even know was a rescue operation to begin with. Lots of fog of war, and it all comes from Professor Marandi. The CENTCOM was silent throughout this whole ordeal from the beginning of the downed aircraft all the way up until now. And now we have, Professor Marandi, as you're hearing the bombs go off behind you, we are having Donald Trump on Easter. People have to remember, this is Easter Sunday, right? This is supposedly the holy war, super godly president that he claims to be. On Easter Sunday, he's giving out ultimatums, Professor Marandi, to Iran. Absolutely ridiculous ultimatums. Here they are. Today, he said, Tuesday is power plant day and bridge day all wrapped up into one. There will be nothing like it. Open the effing straight, you crazy bees, or you'll be living in hell. Just watch. Praise to Allah. And then Professor Marandi, he put out the time of the deadline. Here we go, which is a delayed deadline, by the way, 8 p.m. Eastern time, 34 hours. So, I mean, Professor Marandi, what do you make of this? This is, in terms of the overall shape of the war, the bombings continue. The United States media, though, is reporting that these bombings are going to have to be using different weapons very soon. because they're running out of these JASSMs, standoff strikes. We might see more F-15s, more F-35s, more aircraft down soon as they have to get closer. But what do you make of these threats on Easter Sunday? Just distastefully, disgustingly, in a totally racist fashion, citing Allah. I mean, how do you react to this? How do you think Iran is reacting to this?
He's a psychopath, and Iranians all he's a psychopath, and Iranians in particular are disgusted with those Iranians in the diaspora who've been calling for the war, and uh, you know, and there was one of these women from the diaspora. Apparently, I haven't seen this myself. She went on a show, and uh, she was continued to call for Trump to bomb Iran, and then the host said, "Well, civilian targets are also being like he hit a bridge," and she said, "No, no, he didn't. He always lies. He didn't hit the bridge." And I didn't see this myself, so I'm a bit vague. I may get it wrong a bit. And then the host said, "But he claimed that he hit the bridge." So because she was saying, "No, he didn't hit the bridge," and then the host said, "Well, he claimed that he hit the bridge." And she said, "No, well, Trump always lies." So this is how detached from reality these people have to become live on air in order to justify the crimes being committed against the Iranian people. And of course, those Trump supporters, the MAGA base, they are all implicated in crimes against humanity because they support it. So they're partners in crime. And there's no, but also all those who repeated the lies of 30 some thousand, or now Trump says 40 some thousand today. He said 45,000 or something. Those who repeated these lies, whether it's what's that guy's name, whatever. Maybe it's best not to mention people. All these people are complicit in crimes against humanity. Every single one of them. Those who repeated the lies of 35,000, 80,000, 20,000, 10,000, the regime murdering people on the streets, they're all criminals. Every single one of them. They're all criminals.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And Professor Marandi, now that we have, got into this ultimatum, another one by Donald Trump, Dropsite News is saying that his whole thinking right now is he wants to get this war wrapped up in a couple of days. And if not, he just wants to blow everything to hell. That is the way he's thinking about it. But Iran does not seem phased by this. And now even the Western mainstream media has to admit that not only is Iran not phased by this, but Iran has the means to not be. It's not just a psychological. There's a material backing to this why they aren't phased. It's because they can continue to keep going. And before the show, we were talking about these decoys, and this is the New York Times admitting that Iran is quickly repairing its missile bunkers, according to U.S. intel alone. And these are conservative estimates, conservative assessments. But here it says Iran is deploying significant number of decoys, and the United States is not sure how many of apparent launchers it has destroyed were real. While the U.S. has an estimate of Iranian missile launchers from before the war, that number was not precise. It's been difficult to assess how many launchers may be in bunkers or caves struck by American or Israeli airstrikes. So they're not even sure at all. This whole war, other than the civilians, the infrastructure, anything else they've been trying to hit, they're not even sure if they're hitting anything. And Iran is shown every single day. I mean, yesterday, Bahrain, UAE, Haifa, Beersheba, these are Israeli sites. Every day, every single day. It doesn't stop. And so that makes me wonder, Professor Rondi, did this ultimatum, is it purely meaningless? And do you believe that the United States, Donald Trump, is really trying to seek a quick exit out of this?
Well, there are a number of things there that we have to discuss. One is that, yes, he is seeking a way out. And as we speak, he is apparently seeking a way out. But we have to see what he actually does, because what he was proposing before was complete nonsense. And the Iranians are not going to accept that. The Iranian demands are quite clear. And of course, key to all those demands is control over the Strait of Hormuz. And have no doubt that after this war, continue to control the Strait of Hormuz. And already two countries besides Oman in the Persian Gulf, they have spoken to the Iranians and have agreed uh, to work within the framework of this new situation. And so we have to see what Trump does, because nothing that Trump says has any meaning. He's constantly flip flopping, and a signature by Trump is meaningless. He's a serial liar. He's a psychopath. So for the Iranians, negotiating with the United States is meaningless. The facts on the ground have to change. And not just in the Persian Gulf, but also across West Asia. The facts on the ground have to change. Part of that change, Iran is already implementing. It is changing the status quo. It is changing the status of the Strait of Hormuz. That is permanent. And there's nothing that the Americans can do about it, meaning the regime in Washington. So, but we'll have to see how that plays out. Whether he carries out some further monstrous attacks against Iran, that remains to be seen. But as we've discussed repeatedly before, and as I've been saying for 7, 8 years now, actually, someone reminded me that I spoke on Press TV years ago. I don't know where the clip is, but years ago, before Corona, a few years before Corona, I said that if something happens like what we're seeing today, Iran will destroy all the countries in the Persian Gulf, and it went viral. That was the first thing that I actually said that went viral. And this is not new. It was clear as day from the beginning that this sort of aggression would carry out would lead to this sort of response. And for Trump and the United States not to know how many missiles we have, and then based upon their ignorance launch a war, not to know that we deployed. I knew that we deployed. I knew, and I'm not in government. I knew that we had deployed tens of thousands, if not more, uh, decoys, and many of them are very advanced. I think, a lot are Chinese, and they actually produce heat, and
Sure.
so they've been bombing decoy air defenses, decoy planes, decoy missile launchers, decoy trucks for weeks, and they continue to do so, spending billions of dollars and wearing out their jets, destroying decoys. Each, I don't know how much each costs, probably like a drone. But in any case, for them not to know this, but again, then again, they don't know anything about Iran. What do they know when they keep saying that the so-called regime is unpopular, it kills its own people? Well, the people are the ones on the streets, and they're the ones who defy their airstrikes. So where are those American and European public intellectuals who've been, talking nonsense about Iran and contributing to this narrative of an unpopular regime? People are, they're completely. No one is going to rally around a flag of its own people on the streets, tens of thousands of people. No one should believe that.
Mm.
That is, they say they use this rally around the flag argument to say that no, despite the fact that no, that they kill all these people. No, that's a lie. If they had killed peaceful protesters and tens of thousands of people on the streets, who would rally around such a flag? No one would. That's why Saddam Hussein, his regime collapsed so easily. That's why it was a walkover, because people were sick and disgusted, sick and tired of the regime.
Mhm.
So the only reason why Saddam could fight against Iran was because both blocs were behind him. They gave him chemical weapons. The entire all the Arab regimes were funding him and sending in troops to help him, and sending people to work so that he could take ordinary people to the front lines and people to take their jobs. That's why he could fight. When that was all gone, when the Americans invaded Iraq, there was no real resistance. It was only after the regime fell that gradually we saw people begin to resist, but not for Saddam Hussein. So that rally around the flag nonsense is not a valid argument. Yes, they rallied around the flag, but around what they consider to be the legitimate government. That is the reality. But these people in the West, they're as ignorant about the reality on the ground, on the streets of Tehran, as they are about the reality under the ground in Iran's missile bases and drone bases and naval bases and air force bases and air defense bases.
Yeah, if anyone knows anything about history, if the Iranian government was doing what the United States mainstream corporate media, what think tanks, the Pentagon, CIA, what they all say about Iran, if it were true, they would be aligning with Iran. They would be aligning with Iran. They would not be at war with Iran.
Danny, there's a good book, and I advise all your viewers to buy it. I've actually spoken about it elsewhere. It's called Going to Tehran.
Mhm.
It's written by Flint and Hillary Leverett. They worked in the White House under Condoleezza Rice. He was the head of the Middle East, and she was the head of the Persian Gulf and the National Security Council of the United States. Very important people. And that's where they met and got married. But in any case, Flint Leverett resigned because of the Iraq War, and they wrote a book called "Going to Tehran," and they deal with a lot of the myths about Iran, and I think it's very much worth reading. But also, the book is basically saying that the United States should try to come to terms with Iran. And it talks about the history of Iran and the post. There are very few good books in English on Iran. They're almost all garbage. But this is quite a good book. I don't agree with everything in it, but it's a very good book. And if the United States, and they were hammered by both Democrats and Republicans, all the corporate media attacked them left and right. And these were people who they weren't like leftists or I don't know. Obscure political, figures. They were people who were in the center of everything that was happening. And so they were hammered and marginalized. But if they had listened instead of attacking them, we wouldn't be where we are today. Instead of listening to what Joe Kent admits are the Zionists and the Israeli regime that pushed the U.S. towards war, then instead of listening to them, U.S. analysts had listened to these people, but they can't listen to these people because they get their money from these oligarchs and the Epstein class. So that's why all the analysts write the way they do. That's why all the experts who get published in good publishing companies. That's why they write in the way they do, because that's how you make a living, and that's how these two people were marginalized. Hillary Mann Leverett is Jewish. Attacked and slandered, but it's a good book to read. But in any case, the United States chose death and destruction for the last 2.5 decades, and I believe all of these wars that we've seen, these countless wars, were to bring us to this war.
Yeah.
Remember what Wesley Clark said? 7 countries in 5 years, ending with Iran. Mm-hmm. Well, those 5 years took 25 years, but that's what happened.
Yeah, that's what happened, and Iran has been preparing every step of the way. And so that begs the question then, Professor Marandi, if we look at the landscape of what General Wesley Clark said, a lot of people have made note that, Libya, Syria, Lebanon, I think Somalia, Sudan, Iraq, and then, or was it Afghanistan? I think it was Afghanistan, Somalia, and then Iraq. All those countries have faced some very extreme levels, some less extreme levels of destruction. And many note that Iran is the only one left. But yet here we have now, when I read the reports of what Iran is saying about its Operation True Promise 4, now there's a whole section on joint coordination with Hezbollah and Iraq and Ansar Allah in Yemen. And this is it seems to have come as a surprise that every single day now there's still, despite, what are we on, week 5 of U.S.-Israeli strikes?
Week 6.
Yeah, week 6. Oh yeah, we're now into week 6. I think the first day of week 6. Now that we're here, Professor Marandi, these operations are not letting up. I mean, just yesterday, Kuwait was hit very hard, energy, as well as a naval base. So strikes on energy, naval base. Iran is saying they've killed 25 U.S. personnel in the UAE overnight. Israeli targets were hit. Multiple ships in the Strait of Hormuz were denied pass. So Iran is very active, despite supposedly being isolated. If we take the formula that was supposed to happen. So what went wrong here, Professor Marandi? Why and how does this shape the future of like how this war will conclude?
It's the arrogance of empire. You underestimate the uh, the other. The other is backward. It's third world, as they like to say. They're despotic. They're broken. They're not sophisticated like us. They're camel jockeys. They're uh, sand so and so, and that's how they view. So they look down upon at everyone else. And here they've had to confront the reality that Iran is a very sophisticated country under maximum pressure sanctions. And while the United States has been undermining it through terrorism, as we saw 2, 3 months ago during that armed uh, insurrection that these Western elites pretend. Um, despite all that, Iran has been able to develop indigenous technology to have an advanced missile system, advanced air defense systems that are underground, and we are seeing them still being used. The Iranians have better missile systems than the United States does, despite all this. And then you have a nation, a country where the leader was martyred on day one of the war, and so our senior commanders who were not with him, but they were elsewhere in a different meeting. He was martyred. He refused to leave his home because he said other ordinary Iranians many have nowhere to go. And despite losing those commanders and him, within an hour, the military response began. And despite the fact that we didn't have a leader for a week, the country was completely stable. There was no rush on shops or supermarkets or gas stations or petrol stations at all. Nowhere. Not for a day, not for an hour. Everything was going on as normal. And that's basically because the people were with the state, people were with the Islamic Republic, and they basically for a whole week before, according to the Constitution, in accordance with the Constitution, a new leader was chosen, they were leading the country. The population was leading the country. The people were running the show. They were running the bureaucracy and the armed forces without a leader. Of course, the Constitution states that a three-man leadership is to take charge, but you know, under those circumstances where the superpower and its regional proxies and even countries like the regime in Azerbaijan and the Erdogan regime, they're contributing to the war through different means, through allowing AWACS jets to fly over, and of course, providing the Israeli regime with cheap fuel to help it carry out its genocide in Gaza. Despite all that, we saw the resilience of the Iranian people keep the country not just afloat, but to create this impressive and extraordinary pushback where Iran against the collective West, I mean, Western regimes are too afraid to bring their boats and soldiers here because they know what would happen, but they contribute in other ways to the war by helping the United States. All this whole, in these Arab dictatorships. So this entire front was created against Iran and the axis of resistance. And by the way, the same can be said about Lebanon. We had this discussion together multiple times. The Hezbollah is incapable. It's
It's dead.
collapsed.
A lot of people said it was dead. It was gone.
It was dead. But now we're seeing Hezbollah, and the Israeli regime is so frustrated that instead of targeting Hezbollah, they target homes and apartments. And Western media contributes to them. Epstein class controlled media. Their journalists are in Beirut. in Gaza, they pretended that since they're not there, they cannot confirm anything. They are in Beirut, but they won't tell the story. They'll say that Hezbollah is hitting, the Israeli regime is hitting Hezbollah strongholds in Beirut. In other words, bombing apartment blocks, slaughtering people. So Western media tries to give them cover as much as possible, whereas those journalists all know they're lying and they're misleading the people. So across the board, we're seeing miscalculation after miscalculation after miscalculation, whether it's the support that Iran has among the people, whether it's military capabilities are effective or not, whether Hezbollah has public support, popular support, or whether it has the capabilities to resist. And then there's, of course, Iraq and the resistance in Iraq and Yemen. And if the United States escalates under Trump, then I have no doubt if he escalates and he goes after Iran's vital infrastructure, and these are crimes against humanity, which he's boasting about, and of course, no one has a problem with it in the West, then we will do the same. All the infrastructure of these Arab family dictatorships within the next 3-4 days will be gone. And those regimes will collapse. Iran won't collapse, but those regimes will collapse. They'll be gone. And whenever there is a new regime, they'll definitely be close to Iran. Those slaves and indentured servants and workers, who many of them are not even from this region, maybe they'll control the country. Who knows? The people of Bahrain, they'll finally be able to have their own government, and in Kuwait and elsewhere, they'll finally be able to have a government where there's no despot. So I don't think the Americans, I have no doubt that the Americans won't have the upper hand, but all their assets in the Persian Gulf, which are worth trillions, will be gone. And there will be no more oil, no more gas, no more petrochemicals, nothing coming from the Persian Gulf for years. So even if we have an agreement and then the Strait of Hormuz is open, there are no ships if there's no oil or gas or LNG, or if there's no fertilizer, then what's the point?
Yeah, and if those are the material conditions, Professor Marandi, which are very likely going to be the conditions on the ground, then what you have is, as you predicted, as you have said here many times, you have a global economic crisis. You have a global like that's what the situation will be, and that will, we're already headed there, and Professor
And then
Marandi.
imagine, like, let's just look at India. India, we've seen how the Israeli regime does not care about the Indian people or anyone else. So a lot of Indians, unfortunately, because of their worldview, they support the Israeli regime and their genocidal policies. What has this Israeli war against Iran caused? It's caused the shutting down of the Strait of Hormuz, and now the Israeli regime is every time tries to escalate and destroy Iran's infrastructure to push Iran to do the same. So what will happen to India? The Indian economy will implode. It's already in deep trouble. Will the Indian government last? There'll be crisis in the country for years. The country is, it's a very poor country for the most part. So India, Brazil, all countries, they're all going to face a very dark future because of Zionism, because of Israel, because of Netanyahu and Trump.
Yeah, yeah, and I also want to put out there, Professor Marty, I have this article here, on this channel, all of the sources that we use here on this channel, Professor Marty, that we discuss, it's either, especially about war, right? All you have with wars, you have you have what Iran is saying and what Iran is putting out there, media, as well as other kinds of information to help us understand the U.S. side, Israeli side. That's really it. So that's how we can glean information of what's going on. Now, the Israeli media is always so interesting, Professor Marandi, because while the Hasbara and the penchants for lying is really strong, the force of lying is really strong with Israel. Nonetheless, it's so, as the MAGA chuds would say, it's such a snowflake. It can't really handle any reaction, any response, any retaliation, any resistance to it, that when there is, it automatically panics. And here we and it actually starts to put out some truth even among all the lies. And here's one. IDF admits Israel overestimated damage to Hezbollah, believes Iran can keep firing missiles as long as war continues. You'll see this. This is Times of Israel. You'll see this all over Israeli media almost every single day. You'll see these little nuggets of truth. And, just yesterday, President Rouhani, Hezbollah, they said that they hit Israeli naval assets. I mean, the level of retaliation that Israel and the United States faces. It doesn't get, despite what Pete Hegseth says, it's not getting less severe. It seems like it's either just as severe or getting more severe, especially as
more severe,
especially as the consequences mount around dwindling air defense interceptors, dwindling standoff long-range missiles, and then of course the fact that the longer Iran goes, the more the United States and Israel start to panic about how can we get what we want out of this and start making really disastrous moves, like for example, sending U.S. troops into Iraq. I mean, this has been the level of escalation we've been witnessing. Professor Marandi, what's your thoughts about this? How do you see the overall trajectory, given that we do get especially from Israel? The U.S. actually is probably, especially now that it's put itself out front, it feels less trustworthy even than the panicking Israeli media at this point, because Israel seems to have a much thinner skin when it comes to what is happening to it.
Well, in the past, we used to always hear how brilliant the Israelis were at Hasbara. Actually, they're pretty dumb, and they're pretty foolish, and they're pretty ignorant. And even their policy right now of perpetual war and an extended war, the Iranians want to extend this war because they want the United States to be punished. They want to make sure that this war doesn't happen again. The Israelis, though, don't comprehend the fact that the longer this war lasts, every day that it continues, it's going to turn the world further against them. Because as I was saying earlier, when the global economy collapses, people are going to say this was done by Trump and Netanyahu, and this is all about Zionism. So people across the world are going to attribute their misery to the Israeli regime and Zionism. So already they all recognize that this is a genocidal and monstrous regime because of Gaza and now because of Lebanon and the unprovoked war against Iran. But now, in addition to all that, you're going to have global misery that's really just we're just seeing the first little bit of what's going to come. There's going to be huge upheaval in the weeks ahead, and it's not going to be pretty. And I don't welcome it, because people everywhere, all of us are going to, all your viewers, all your listeners, all of us, everyone's going to be affected in a negative way. But everyone is going to attribute this to the Israeli regime. And also, the Israeli regime is a tiny, puny, vulnerable, weak regime. Its strength comes from all the support it gets from the West and the United States in particular. Well, if there's global economic crisis, not quite sure in future how much an angry American public is going to accept continued support for the Israeli regime as as if it's business as usual.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not quite sure this is a smart move by the regime. I think actually it's going to hurt it a lot. But this is again the arrogance of empire. They overestimate themselves. They underestimate everyone else, and ultimately, that's how empires collapse. We've already seen over the last couple of decades how the U.S. empire has been going downhill, and I think now with this war, it is going to go downhill much faster than anything we've ever seen before.
Yeah, and the support for this war is already very low. It's going to get even lower, and yet we have the Trump administration, Donald Trump himself, requesting, believe it or not, Professor Rondi, $1.5 trillion military defense, quote unquote, budget, arguing that everything else needs to be cut in order to make this happen, despite the fact that this war already doesn't have public support in any kind of majority, let alone a plurality. It's minority support. It's only getting worse, and it will get worse when those conditions strike, Professor Marandi, that you have outlined that are already happening.
So as the economy goes downhill and as people are paying more at the pump, he wants to take away more money from the people and give it to uh, the uh, the the military industrial complex that is
Hmm.
who's controlled by a handful of billionaires. But I think that reality is going to. I mean, unless there's the Trump backs down seriously, I think that the events that are coming, the global economic hardship that's coming, is going to change things in ways that we just simply cannot uh, foresee right now.
No, no, we only see what is already apparent, which is despite all of what's been invested. I mean, the 1.5 trillion, that feels like a please, we need this to rebuild everything that we've lost, which is not even the reality is that it's not so simple as many analysts on this show have talked about. You can't just throw money at destroyed THAADs, destroyed Patriots, destroyed military
Oh, and
bases,
by the
all of this.
way,
You can't just
Danny,
do that. Yep.
first of all, one thing that I should point out is that the Persian Gulf region is going to become very warm very soon, and
Oh yeah.
the heat, and then you'll have sand, you'll have sandstorms. It's going to be dry, and these are all desert countries. In fact, Iran, in right now we have a lot. We've had just at during the first couple of weeks of war, we had snow. We had snow on a lot of snow in the north of Tehran and on the mountains, and it's been raining a lot the last few weeks, and so the mountains here are full of snow. If you look up the mountains in Tehran, it's a pretty sight. But in the Persian Gulf region, these are all deserts, and it's going to get hot very fast. And if there is escalation and the United States destroys our critical infrastructure, if it's destroyed on the other side of the Persian Gulf, everyone will have to leave. Tens of millions of people will have to move. But in addition to that, all these weapons of the United States that they put here, and they're sensitive, air jets and so on, they're all going to be severely affected by the sand. And it's going to be very costly for repairing all of these. So if anyone thinks that that $1.5 trillion is going to go to, you know, futuristic weapons,
No.
I think a lot of it is just going to go to repairing the trucks and the vehicles and the equipment and the planes and all that, because things are going to go downhill very fast.
Yeah. And over a number, everyone remember, over a number of years in a very limited amount. That's how the military industrial complex works. They
And they don't
maximize.
have the infrastructure here to protect their
No.
hardware. They're not in military bases because Iran has destroyed all those bases. So they're out in the desert, to the west of Saudi Arabia and in Jordan and elsewhere. And so they are more. So when they carried out the war against Iraq, or both wars, they brought in infrastructure to, for a long-term stay to protect their assets. But here they just rush them, and they're not in places where they would normally stay. So this is going to be, their costs, their hidden costs that are just not being calculated. And also the cost right now, they say like this war is costing this, I don't know, a couple of $1 billion a day. It's much more than that. The oil and the gas and the the fertilizer and the petrochemicals that these Arab family dictatorships are not exporting right now, they're all damaging the US economy because much of the money goes to US stocks and bonds. And a lot of the money also goes to purchasing US weapons that they can't use because they don't even have, like Qatar has 400,000 people. How are they going to use all those planes? They're basically for kickbacks, for commissions, for both sides. People of influence in US government, people, princes on this side. So that money is not available, because they're not making any money and their infrastructure is being damaged. And if it's destroyed, then everything changes. So there's a multi-layer of the damage to the U.S. economy is it's going to gradually reveal itself over time.
Yeah, and final 2 points I want you to comment on. There's an audience question, but first I want to put out some breaking news. So, coming full circle, right? As we're talking, a lot of things are being revealed. Patricia Marins, who's a very reliable, she does great independent work on military affairs, understanding geopolitics. She posts this. So, DD Geopolitics, a friend of this show, they published an image I won't put up here because of issues with censorship, but they've already published an image that they say is proof that in one of these C-130s that were downed by Iran in this so-called operation, rescue operation, that there was an American, a U.S. Pilot in there, incinerated. Essentially, you can see it. So everyone can check that out on X if they want to go to DD Geopolitics. But nonetheless, Professor Marins is breaking some news about how U.S. forces tried to use an old agricultural airstrip in Iran was already prepared for the ambush, and then goes into all of the costs of the losses that Iran was able to inflict in terms of the helicopters, the two transport aircraft, and then going into, I mean, just this alone, Professor Marandi, is devastating. F-15, A-10, MQ-9 drones, another A-10 damage, Black Hawk helicopters. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And this is only in the last 72 hours or so. So we're talking about massive damage to what's supposed to be the unflappable, unstoppable, invincible Air Force, on top of all of the damage to the bases, all of the damage to Israel, all of the damage to the Gulf infrastructure, oil, gas. I mean, yeah, to say the cost is what they're saying, 2 billion, ridiculous. 2 billion a day, absolutely not. If you count what Hezbollah is doing to Israel, they've destroyed over 100 tanks. That's like $600 million. So we're talking about a massive amount of money
And
being
Yemen has
hemorrhaged.
not yet shut down the Red Sea.
Which will, I mean, when that happens, we are going to see oil. If people think oil markets right now are absolutely in crisis, we haven't seen anything yet. So, your final reaction to this, and then the last question that an audience member, a question the audience member had. I think it's the only one, but I'll look. No, there's a couple, but here is one of them. How does person Ronnie feel about the world being behind Iran, most of the world?
It's uh it's quite stunning actually how popular Iran has become across the world, and how Sunnis have been being taught by the Qataris and Erdogan and Saudi Arabia and the Emirates to hate the Shia, and they've been taught to be sectarian. And these regimes have been supporting ISIS and Al Qaeda and the dirty war in Syria. But now everything is being exposed, and so we see huge support among Sunnis across the world for the axis of resistance. They see right through the propaganda now. They see right through the nonsense of of Syria, of all the all these regimes are supporting or have continued to do business with as usual with Netanyahu, and it is the axis of resistance that's making the sacrifices. And we see a lot of cooperation in Lebanon. And among the global south, you see the left and much of the right supporting Iran, and in Latin America and Africa and across Asia, including in India, lots of support. And I find that in the West, there, I was speaking to one of your guests, someone who you've had on your show before, a very old friend of mine for 20 20 years. He was telling me that in the West, there are people, not necessarily the majority, but a very interesting segment of people who he knows who views on the war and on Iran have evolved dramatically. So this is, of course, the doing their own doing. The West has behaved so shamelessly and shamefully. I mean, with regards to Gaza, with regards to Lebanon, with regards to Palestinians, with regards to the entire world, but especially in these last 2 3 years, that the facade, the mask has been removed, and people see the reality of what the Western elites are, and people in the West are seeing it. So the world is changing, and that's why I think people should read more about Iran. People should read, like I said, like the book on going to Tehran, that sort of thing, and they'll see that Iran is actually. My view is that Iran is, and the axis of resistance. These are shining stars of humanity. It doesn't bother me if anyone attacks me or calls me names or threatens to kill me or whatever. I don't care. It's we do what we have to do, and this is what I believe. And I think a lot of people are beginning to see that the propaganda is just propaganda.
Hmm. Yeah, indeed, Professor Morandi. Uh, I'm just putting up all the rest of the super chat. Somebody asked, "Is the rescued pilot alive?" We actually don't know. We only have word from what Pete Hegseth, Donald Trump are saying. Someone brought up a good point here. While closing the Strait of Hormuz and raising the price of oil over $200, spur the world to significantly reduce the usage of fossil fuels and be positive in the fight against climate change. I mean, China's renewable energy sector is certainly going to be booming because of this. But I don't know if you have any reaction to
Yeah, but
that question.
this is not going to be a good thing. This is going to be tragic. We have to always remember Iran did not start this war. If you watch Western media, you think Iran did it.
Right.
Iran did not want this war. Iran at no phase did it initiate escalation. At no phase. It waited for that. And people criticize Iran.
Yeah.
They say, why don't you hit them harder? Why? The Iranians have moral boundaries. The
Yes.
Islamic Republic of Iran has moral boundaries based upon its religious beliefs. It has moral boundaries. It's difficult for many people. Oh, the mullahs in Iran, these, they kill people on the streets, they gun them down day and night, and I don't know, all the nonsense. Women and I mean, the women are the ones who are preserving the revolution. They're the ones on the streets every night on the streets in the cold. It would rain and snow. It was cold. Tehran is cold. It's still cold. I mean, Iran is not all a desert. We have forests in the north. We have lots of snow on the mountains of Tehran right now. And these young women, and I'm referring to the young women are on the streets, and they've under rain and snow and less rain now. I mean, the rain, sorry, less snow now, but still rain. We had heavy rain yesterday, the day before in Tehran. They're on the streets and under threat of death and destruction because these monsters, these pilots, they fire missiles at them. So, you know, so all these narratives on Iran obviously are nonsense. But yes, Iran has moral boundaries. So they wait for the other side to escalate. But when the other side escalates, they hit hard, just like when they hit our petrochemical plants and the bridge
Mhm.
the other day, yesterday and the day before. Now, all civilian targets. Now the Iranians have retaliated. But what do the Iranians do? They say beforehand that they're going to strike. Even though it helps the other side prepare itself, it's air defenses, but they say so beforehand. And they've been striking uh, petrochemical plants and other things in some of these countries in the Persian Gulf because they have a sense of morality. If in Iran we didn't want this war, it's been imposed upon us. But hopefully, with the defeat of Trump, this madman and psychopath, and Netanyahu, this the great evil, and Zionism, the great evil of our time, we'll have peace. But no, um, if you suddenly take oil and gas and fertilizer and petrochemicals away from people, it's going to create a global catastrophe and probably starvation. So people have to put pressure on the Trump regime and to bring this madness to an end. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. Somebody raised the point that two MC A130s can carry 180 paratroopers or 120 if there's equipment. So what were they doing when they landed, only to be abandoned
Exactly.
and or destroyed? So that means, of course, we don't know how many exactly were on there, but there were likely many casualties if we cannot account
No,
for them at all.
but also, there may have been there may have been many casualties. I don't know. And if the pilot thing is true, then that indicates that they're not telling the truth. But why so many
Yeah,
troops?
exactly.
It's this is more than just about. This is what the Iranians are saying that they
Yeah.
were planning something and it didn't go well.
Yeah, it seemed like they were testing. I mean, it wouldn't be a surprise if they were using this F-15 pilot down as a kind of a test run for something. How far can they go
In any case,
and
the
penetrate?
generals, they
It
were
failed.
they were resisting something stupid,
Yeah,
obviously.
yeah.
That's why they were removed.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and it failed badly. I mean, just the aircraft alone, we will I guess we'll more will come out, Professor Marandi, on the details as things emerge, but I wanna thank everyone who gave a super chat, asked questions, of course, that's great. Everyone, Professor Marandi said multiple times in this stream that there were bombs, overhead, that, very close. He's working very hard here, so if you want his voice past this stream to be heard, after this, you hit that like button because that will tell YouTube that this video is worth watching after we are done live. So do that. That's the best free thing you can do. And of course, you can support this show in the video description below. I'll be back tomorrow with Justin Podor and John Elmer. They're going to do a sit rep here. We're going to get into the military situation that they've been following. 4 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow, Monday, April 6th. Professor Marty, anything you want to say before we head out of here?
No, no, nothing. Just thank you, and thank your audience for listening. And no one should ever be discouraged. That's the reality of human existence, and we should just do what we have to do. And if we do what we have to do, that is enough.
Mhm.
So sometimes people get depressed and discouraged. They shouldn't be, or they feel guilty for what their government is doing. If they're resisting, if they're opposing it, if they're active, if they're raising awareness, they have nothing to be ashamed of or to apologize for, because it's not their doing.
Yeah, yeah, great way to end this program. Everybody hit the like button before you go. We are out. Professor Marty will be back.